The Kailh Pro line of switches are the result of Kailh, who's been mocked as a subpar knockoff manufacturer, really stepping up their game in the recent years. They are a tactile switch, and the purple stem is likely trying to tell us that they're similar to Zelios, a community favorite. I bought these from Novelkeys to put in my KBD 661, but I'm a little disappointed, but not in the way you'd expect. Here's a force curve graph provided by the manufacturer found on Novelkeys. You can see that the key travel at 3.6mm is shorter than in regular switches, which have 4mm. I didn't find this to be too noticeable, as for me, the spring weight is heavy enough to prevent bottoming out. The part I was disappointed about with this switch was the tactility. The tactile bump is larger than that of a brown switch, but not by much. Additionally, the bump is uncommon in that it's located much higher in the key press. If we go back to the force curve, you can see that the bump starts almost immediately at the top, whereas a Zelios switch has a good amount of pre-travel before the bump. When you press the switch slowly, it sort of feels like you're already at the middle of the bump, and the tactile feedback is just coming out of it. When you press them at regular typing speeds, they feel like strange linears. When I try them side by side with linear switches, I can definitely notice a distinct difference, but I can't quite put my finger on it. A lot of people say that brown switches feel like linears, but I think this is closer to it, and not really in a bad way. Though the Kailh Pro Purples are a tactile switch, I might put them in their own category of tactile linear, or tactilier switches. Another consequence of this high bump is the switch feeling a lot heavier than the others with a similar bottom out weight rating. The fact that the bump is on top means that the rest of the way is linear, and it's easier to notice the spring force in a linear switch. This is in contrast to a more traditional tactile switch, whose weight is not as noticeable because of the reduced post-bump travel. Personally, I think this switch feels somewhat like 78-gram Zelios. I never really liked them because they were too heavy and their tactility was significantly reduced by the heavier weight. And even though the spring in this switch is rated for much less, it reproduces that feel. With all these comparisons to other switches, here are some shots of the stems. Here is the Kailh Pro Purple next to a Zelio. Here it is next to an Otemu Ice Purple. And finally, here's one next to a Cherry MX Brown. I got a little curious with the switch, so I did a spring swap with the 4 I had left over from the build. I put springs from Cherry MX Blue switches, which are a little lighter, and it seems to have increased the amount of tactility. Before I go and apply this mod to every switch in my KBD 661, here's a typing demonstration with no mods. After several hours of desoldering, switch top opening, and spring swapping later, I have the same keyboard with Kailh Pro Purples with Cherry MX Blue springs. A random source I found on Reddit says that blue springs have a bottom out force of about 64 grams, so we'll go with that. One thing I noticed about these modded switches before I even installed them was how much noisier they were. The loose switches give sort of a faint click on the tactile bump, which sort of resembles an echo of click jacket switches. However, once installed, you don't hear this noise, but the overall sound level is higher. They do feel noticeably different, but they still have the same characteristics as before. I'm not sure if this is a placebo effect, but I feel like the tactile bump, which is still distinctly at the top, is a little more noticeable. If we think of a regular tactile switch as a speed bump in the road, The bump on the Kailh Pro Purples are like driving over a slight edge from your driveway onto the road. When modded, the height of the ledge is a little bit higher. With the lower spring force, I found myself bottoming out a lot more often. While the bump is more noticeable, I don't think the mod is really worth putting your time into. I think these switches work best with stock springs, which really prevents the bottom out. The Kailh Pro Purples are pretty nice to type on. They're fairly smooth, and the tall tactile bump they offer is not really found in switches outside of Kailh's lineup. While I was disappointed, this was largely due to me wanting a cheaper alternative to Zelios, but this is not really a comparable switch. I know manufacturers are really starting to run out of common colors, but I think this switch can really benefit from a dissociation from Zelios. I really hope you'll give this switch a try soon, and maybe you'll really like them. If you liked the video, like it, and subscribe for more for keyboard and switch reviews in the future.